Hello, everybody. This is Brian Tonsoni, and you're listening or watching Sports Talk with Tonsoni on Tuesday night. And we have some old veterans with us, and we have a special guest with us that we will be discussing some college football and doing a Major League Baseball preview. So let's get it started. We have a couple of veteran graduates of Delphi Bracketology with us today. We'll start off with Daniel Jakes. Give us your hot take on college football, Daniel.
Oh, my hot take this week, it's coming from Tennessee. Butch Jones, hot seat. Three of Tennessee's six largest losses have come under the Butch Jones era. Why hasn't he been fired yet? 44-0, I think this past weekend was. Man, you just can't keep a job losing games like that. He needs to be gone by the end of the season. New coach coming in. Look out for it.
And returning another Delphi Bracketology graduate, Jesse Scowden. What's your take on college football?
My take is very interesting coming from the Vanderbilt-Alabama game. I don't understand how Vanderbilt still has a football program after this past week losing 59-0. Man, that was pretty ugly.
That was 2 weeks ago, I think. Not to rain on your parade, but yeah, Vanderbilt, all the hype. I get that. And now let me introduce to you Sammy Jacobs of Hoosier Huddle, a good friend of mine, an outstanding reporter, covers IU football better than anybody else, and it's an honor that he wants to spend some time before his Yankees take the field. Sammy, your take.
My hot take is that the SEC is the worst Power 5 conference in 2017.
And we got to go back and discuss that here in a second. But my hot take is I love the coaches. As a coach myself in a different sport, you had Troy beating LSU, and their coach is giving us post game, this real somber post game, and then he just stops in the middle and says, "We just beat LSU." That's college football. And then you have Mike Leach out at Washington State commenting on the fans rushing the field, claiming it was just like Woodstock, only everyone had their clothes on. So I think a couple of coaches' quotes. But let's go back, Sammy. I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about SEC, not as dominant as it has been in the past. That's a good take.
Well, Alabama's Alabama. They're arguably the best team in the country right now with Clemson. But the bottom of the SEC, and you saw it with the Big Ten, last year where Rutgers, Purdue, and Illinois were absolutely horrible. This year, you have so much trouble in the SEC. Missouri stinks. Vanderbilt's okay. They're not they just got rocked by Alabama and Florida. They're coming back down to earth. Tennessee lost 44-0 last week. South Carolina stinks. Ole Miss stinks. Arkansas stinks. LSU stinks. Mississippi State stinks. I mean, there are so many bad teams in the SEC right now, and a lot of it's going to have to do with coaching hires. Ed Orgeron at LSU was on nobody's list to be a head coach. They gave him a huge contract, $12 million buyout for a school that's already broke. His track record as the head coach is terrible. That was just an awful hire at a program that could go out and get anybody. Ole Miss is a mess with everything that went on in August there, and they're going to get sanctions. Missouri's a mess. They're going to change coaches. Tennessee's a mess. Butch Jones is probably on his way out at Tennessee. Look for Jeff Brom to go there sometime. Kentucky, when Kentucky football is a legitimate contender in the SEC East, it is not good for your conference.
Jesse, what are your thoughts on Sammy's real tirade against the SEC?
Yeah, so thanks for correcting me. It was Ole Miss this week. They lost 66 to, I think it was 3 against Alabama. But I agree 100%. Alabama's making that look like a softball conference.
Yeah. Daniel, your thoughts on the SEC?
I think Sammy left off one team that's probably the best contender to give Alabama a run for their money, and that's Georgia. Are they actually real or not is the big question. I guess we'll see that come in their game against Kentucky.
Yeah, I have to agree with Sammy. I'm kind of enjoying the demise of the SEC. I'd like to see the demise of Alabama a little bit. I'm tired of seeing them in the playoff and the championship game. But, Florida's one of their few ranked teams, and they really haven't impressed. They have a quarterback issue. I kind of have liked Tennessee in the past, but they're just struggling. LSU losing at home to Troy. The Big Ten's got 4 teams in the top 10, and the SEC has 4 teams in the top 25, and I'm not sure that they need 4 teams in the top 25. So,
well, the biggest difference is the coaching. And Brian, you said you're a coach earlier and appreciate it, but look at the Big Ten hires. You hired Jeff Brom, who's a great offensive mind. Tom Allen, the jury's still out on Tom Allen, but you had Jim Harbaugh coming in. Urban Meyer went from the SEC to the Big Ten. PJ Fleck is at Minnesota. DJ Durkin's doing well. I mean, the only guy in the Big Ten who's been hired in the last 3 years who stinks is Chris Ash, who has not scored a point against Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, and Michigan since 2015.
Hey, that leads me. I'm going to ask the guys here. I'll start with Daniel. Rutgers in the Big Ten. Football or basketball. We're in the Midwest. What's your take on Rutgers? And your team just exploded on them this weekend. Talk a little bit about Rutgers.
Rutgers should have stayed in the Big East. Oh, my goodness. The only reason they're here was for that TV contract. Oh, my.
Nobody
get them
moves
out
for
of here.
Rutgers in New York.
Get them out of here.
You're from New York. Why is Rutgers in the Big Ten?
Because I get a free trip home every other year.
Jesse, any thoughts on Rutgers?
Yeah, I honestly don't understand why the Big Ten. I think they were just trying to expand east. That would be my only guess.
And I think it's money. I think you want to get in that New York market and so forth. And Sammy and I were texting back and forth. I wonder if, like Indiana fans or some other fans, it's playing Maryland and Rutgers, no disrespect to those schools, it's not like playing Iowa and Illinois and Northwestern, some teams that have been traditionally coming into venues that we only see every few years. So Rutgers there.
I think. Hold on. I'd like to say something. I think it also takes away from the Big Ten tournament. This past year was held in Washington, D.C. That was awful. I think that was a failed experiment. I think it should have stayed in the Midwest. I think it should have stayed in Chicago or Indy, where all the schools can travel. I mean, I remember going with Jesse and meeting up with you and Mr. Gasser to watch. Man, who was it? It was Ohio State and Michigan State, and then I think it was Nebraska and some other team. But I mean, that atmosphere in Banker's Life, it was incredible. And then we take it out east, and I think that atmosphere died out. And so I think we need to keep it in the Midwest, keep these fans and travel distance, and keep the atmosphere for the players. Because, I mean, the players don't want to go to a Big Ten title game that's going to be a dead atmosphere. I mean, that's no fun.
Yeah, and Indianapolis is a great place. I appreciate the college in the football, the Big Ten tournament, or the championship game, I should say, is in Lucas Oil. That's nice, and it's in the center of the conference. I like that. And this year, nothing's better than the Garden, and Sammy can attest to that, I think, other than when the Knicks play in the Garden. But the Garden is a basketball mecca, and I'm kind of excited to see the Big Ten in there. I'm not excited to see it a week early. I think that takes away, but I would like to see that stuff take in the West. Sammy, your thoughts on Rutgers other than free trip home?
Well, it's clearly a move made by money, and it's to get the Big Ten network. There are not a lot of Rutgers fans in the New York area, but what it did was it forced all the cable companies in New York and in the Washington area to make people pay for the Big Ten network, and instead of having it as an optional package, it was permanently on there. So you get more eyeballs, but there are a lot of alumni from all Big Ten schools in New York who already paid for the Big Ten network. So that's the thing. As far as the Big Ten championship at the Garden, I hate it. The Big Ten, the Garden, it is a basketball mecca, but the Big East tournament belongs there. And growing up as a kid with the old Big East, We went every year, and it was awesome. Like you guys said, go. It's in downtown. It's in Midtown Manhattan. You got all the bars there. You have fans from all these schools, and every game was like a rivalry game. You had St. John's, Georgetown, UConn, Syracuse, Providence, Boston College. Every team hated each other for one reason or another, and that's what's going to be missing. Now, I think the atmosphere for the Big Ten will be good because there are so many alumni in New York. It's a destination that people want to go to, and stuff like that. But having it a week early, it just leave it in Indianapolis. It is perfect in Indianapolis, and Indianapolis does a great job of hosting these events. The Final Four should always be here. The Big Ten championship game should always be here. And the Big Ten tournament should always be here. It is so much fun going to all these different bars and places.
Yeah, Sammy brings up a conversation for another night. I think just like the baseball has a permanent championship site in Omaha, Indianapolis would be a great permanent site for the Final Four, but we'll hold that discussion. Jesse, I'm going to come to you for a little Heisman talk. Obviously, Penn State, Barkley, and then the quarterback from Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield, probably top two. What do you think? What do you think about the Heisman, Jesse?
Yeah, I think you just laid it out there. Those are definitely the top two favorite. As you can see, Saquon Barkley pretty much made Penn State beat our Hoosiers. But I wouldn't sleep on Washington State's quarterback Luke Falk. He had a really nice week against USC, leading to the victory. I think he had like 350 yards with 2 TDs. I think you might want to look at him, but those two are clearly the top favorite.
Daniel, your thoughts? Is it a two-man race, or can anyone?
It's not even a two-man. Just give that thing to Saquon now. That dude is a monster.
Ooh.
He is a man amongst boys when he's on that field.
He hasn't played your Buckeyes yet.
Oh, I don't want him to. He's going to make our front seven look silly.
You guys need to watch Pac-12 After Dark.
All right, Sammy, who's the outside candidate?
Bryce Love.
Bryce Love from Stanford gets no love at all. He has over 1,000 rushing yards already. He has 8 touchdowns, and that's not even going to receiving. He's only has 5 receiving yards, but the guy can run. He's got 1,000 yards in 5 games, 8 touchdowns. Luke Falk is also up there. Saquon Barkley is really good, but, man, he only had 56 yards rushing against IU. Yeah, he returned a kick for a touchdown, and he threw a garbage pass there at the end of the game for Heisman points. But, he'll have more of a chance to show off against some bigger opponents, Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State. All those games left on the table for him. But Bryce Love is getting buried out in Stanford, and he's a guy who really deserves to be talked about. And then, it's anybody's game. Baker Mayfield had his Heisman moment at Ohio Stadium. He thought Mason Rudolph might do it, but they lost to TCU there in the Big 12. So I think it's a 3-man race, maybe a 4-man race with Bryce Love, Saquon Barkley, Baker Mayfield, and Luke Falk from Washington State, if they could keep winning games.
Jesse, I'm coming back to you. Lamar Jackson, won it last year, still putting up decent numbers, lost a big game to Clemson. Do you think he has a chance to climb back in the Heisman race?
Knowing his playmaking skills, I really think he can come back into the race. But as you said, the 3-man race right now is just taken over. And honestly, I don't think he'll make it back in there, but with his playmaking skills, he can always come back with a solid week.
And I'm always wondering too, you got the West Coast bias without seeing the games late at night, and Stanford's lost. The record matters somewhat too. I think it shouldn't be. It's an individual player, and you should look at those stats. Those stats that Sammy shared with us are incredible. And if it is the best player in college football, it shouldn't be the best player on the best team. It should just be the best overall player. Real quick here. Oh, go ahead.
Here's
Sam.
my issue with the Heisman. If you have a Heisman vote, it is your responsibility to watch these games. You might not watch the Stanford games early in the year, but the guy has 1,000 yards rushing. Are you telling me you're not staying up until 10 o'clock on the East Coast to see this guy play? If you're not, hand me your Heisman vote, and I'll do it. Because I love Pac-12 After Dark. I have 2 DVRs. So just give me your Heisman vote. I have enough time to watch all these games. Let's go.
I got quick thing on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, when he puts up these yards, do you think you should take into account the opponent he's playing?
Sammy?
Yeah. You should, but he's played Rice, USC, San Diego State, who's been really good, UCLA, and Arizona State. It's not like he's playing Coastal Carolina, Georgia Southern, and a couple other cupcakes. Now, every team is going to be, is going to play a few cupcakes, but he's not running for like 400 yards against one team and 0 yards against another team. His rushing stats, he's gone over 100 and he's gone over 160 yards against every team, and he rushed for 301 yards against Arizona State. Now, Arizona State stinks, but they're still a Pac-12 team. It's not like he's running over, a Division III team with kids just out of high school.
So should we consider Rutgers to be a Division III team at this point?
Probably, but here's the thing. We got the running back Penny at San Diego State, too, that has an outside chance. But I think Love is a lot better than he is. But like Leonard Fournette ran into a couple games where he got stymied. And that's my concern with Barkley is if playing Ohio State and Michigan back-to-back, and then he's had only 56 yards against IU, if he puts a string of sub-100s and Penn State happens to lose, that could shake things up. So I think that it's a two-man race right now, but I think there are 3 or 4 candidates that can climb their way back in given some results. Let's go to the college football playoff real quick. It's a 4-team playoff. We know that there are probably 2 solid teams in and maybe 5 or 6 teams fighting for spot 3 and 4. Let's go, Daniel. Alabama, Clemson, we'll say, are 1-2. Who are your next 2 teams, Daniel?
Right now, I would say probably Penn State and Oklahoma, just because of how consistent they've been. I don't think that those 2 will lose. I think Oklahoma, their worst case scenario is that they lose to Oklahoma State in their final game, and then Oklahoma State wins out, and they have to play each other for that final spot in the playoff. And then Penn State, I think that you mentioned it. Their worst case scenario is to lose those games back to back against Michigan and Ohio State, and so I think those are the top 2.
Jesse, Alabama, Clemson automatically in. We've heard Penn State, Oklahoma. Is there anyone else that you're looking at that possibly is deserving right now?
If I were to say anything, I'd say the winner of the Big Ten, so probably Michigan.
Okay. Whoever wins, you're saying whoever wins the Big Ten is going to slot into one of those because of the competition. Yeah. Let's go to Sammy. Who do you got sliding into the playoff?
Oklahoma, I think, is in there right now. As Daniel said, if they lose to Oklahoma State, that's going to be tough. Oklahoma State lost to TCU. They do play in a championship game this year, but it's the top 2. They don't do division, so it's the top 2 who will play in there. They need to go undefeated, I think, although that win at Ohio State will help them, just like Ohio State's win over them last year helped Ohio State get in with 1 loss. Who slides into that 4 spot? I would put Penn State right now. I do think they are the best team in the Big Ten. Their defense is really, really good. Saquon Barkley, even though he didn't rush very well against Indiana, he still had 220 some odd total yards. All-purpose yards. He's Penn State's leading receiver as well. You saw what he could do in the kicking game. He's a guy you just can't shut down in one aspect of the game. It's going to come down to probably that Ohio State-Penn State game in Columbus in November. I do think Penn State has a shot there. You can't tell what Ohio State is. They lost to the only really good team that they played this year. They beat up on Army, UNLV, and Rutgers, who we've designated as a Division III team. But Georgia could slide into, and Washington as well. Georgia is a team, they don't play Alabama in the regular season. They could run the table, get to that championship game. If they beat Alabama, are you leaving out a 1-loss Alabama squad over a 1-loss Ohio State squad? I don't know. I don't know what
I honestly, as an Ohio State fan, I would put Alabama in over Ohio State at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to what this committee thinks. I'm not a big believer in the committee. I don't think they watch all the games. They have these biases already about, big teams, big markets, all those things. And then Washington's quietly sitting there at 6, at 5-0. They do not have a great non-conference schedule, but they do get a chance to play Washington State. They do get Oregon, Washington State, Stanford, Utah, and then they could potentially play USC or another team from the Pac-12 South in the Pac-12 championship game, giving them another quality win. They could sneak up into that four spot right now. But I would put Oklahoma and Penn State in there, where and Georgia at 5 and Washington at 6.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting thing. I think it's going to come down to a Pac-12 versus Big 12. It's going to be between those two conferences, because I think the Big Ten's quality schedule, and even if a one-team loss from the Big Ten deserves to go, Alabama from the SEC, Clemson from the ACC, I don't see those teams getting beat. Obviously, if they do, it mixes things up. So then if a Big Ten school gets in and those two schools get in, then you got to take an Oklahoma if they're undefeated. If they get beat, then it opens up a Washington. Washington gets beat, then you might see a second team from one of those conferences, the Big Ten, or maybe a Georgia if their only loss is to an Alabama. So we got a lot of time yet to go. Yeah, Daniel.
I do want to say one thing about the ACC. I honestly believe that Miami could run the table and then beat Clemson in the title game. I mean, they don't. I'm not saying that they have a cupcake schedule, but I think they have one of the easier schedules out of the top 15 teams to possibly get that final slot. They will have all that momentum going into the title game. I'm just saying, if any team that has an outside chance that nobody is really talking about, I would say it's the Hurricanes. I mean, they're playing with a lot of swagger right now. I think they're a dangerous team.
That's a good pick, Sammy. Let's. I might have you back next week for our talk on our quarterback thing after we see what happens this weekend. We got about 7 or 8 minutes to do our Major League Baseball preview. The playoffs start tonight with the Yankees hosting the Twins in a one-game wild card. The National League wild card is Arizona hosting Colorado, and then the winners will advance to Thursday and Friday to the National League Division Series. Jesse, let's hear your thoughts on the Major League Baseball playoffs.
Tonight's game is really going to be – I think it's going to be a good game. I think is it Severino versus Santana, I'm going to assume.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's going to be a really good game. Everyone loves to watch Judge. Are we saying our predictions now, or are we waiting for that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm going to take the Yankees in that one. I believe they're the Twins' third baseman Sano's out. I think they ruled him out earlier today. And Santana's up there in age, and it'll be interesting because he is you could say a veteran. So.
Okay, so let's run through, Jesse, while you're here. So you got the Yankees winning. Who you got in the National League wild card, real quick?
Probably take the D-backs on that one.
Okay, and then we might do this again as the playoffs come closer. But what's your World Series matchup right now as you see it before any of these games get started?
I'm gonna go from last year, Cubs, Indians.
Cubs, Indians. Daniel, thoughts on the wild card game and who might make the World Series?
Well, I love the Twins making it into the playoffs after a 100-loss season. I definitely think that says something about the character that Minnesota has in their locker room. Because I don't as a fan, you don't think that a team that has a 100-loss season is going to come back from that anytime soon and make it into the playoffs. I think that speaks a lot about what they have going on at Minnesota. And plus, I hate the Yankees. Sorry, Sammy. But I like the Twins tonight. I think Santana, he's a veteran, like Jesse said. I think he controls the game. And then I like the D-backs. I think the pitching wins it for him. And I mean, Paul Goldschmidt, man, he is a monster.
He's incredible. So who are your World Series teams if you had to pick right now?
I would go Indians and Dodgers. I think the Dodgers are kind of hitting a slow streak, but I think they get enough momentum back in that first round to get them there. But I think it's the Indians to lose.
I'm going to go ahead and then we're going to end with Sammy here. I think the Yankees win tonight. I think the two home teams win. I think it's the advantage is just a plus. I know some road teams have won in the past, but I think those teams advance. I always think it comes down to pitching. And I think Washington right now, if Scherzer is healthy, I think they have the pitching and the bullpen combination, and their lineup is hard to face as well. I think the Nationals will beat the Dodgers, and I think that it'll be I don't want to pick Boston, but I think Boston's going to defeat Houston and then play the Indians, and so I think it's the Washington Nationals, Cleveland Indians on first pick, just based on I think those two teams have the best pitching staffs, and that's what I'm going with. Obviously, would like to see my Cubs continue to win. I just don't know that they'll do it this year. Sammy, your thoughts on Major League Baseball, the two wild card games, and then a couple predictions on your World Series teams.
All right. Obviously, I'm going with the Yankees. Severino has been awesome this year. The bullpen has been awesome. Chapman is back to being the Chapman we saw, early in the year last year, throwing 103. He has his swagger back. So I'm taking the Yankees tonight. I'm taking the Diamondbacks at home with Zach Greinke going. JD Martinez has been an excellent addition to that team as well, hitting-wise, to go at Paul Goldschmidt. So I'm going to take Arizona. There, my World Series prediction. I'm going to go Cleveland and the Dodgers. Again, it's two great pitching staffs. I think Cleveland has played well all year. They're on a mission from last year to end that streak. The Dodgers, you have Kershaw, who's been a kind of a liability in the playoffs, hasn't pitched that well. But you also have Darvish, Rich Hill, who I thought was washed up like 8 years ago, but he's pitching well. And then Cody Bellinger and those guys could hit as well. But, yeah, I don't think the Red Sox win their series, and I'm not buying the Miami Hurricanes undefeated in October. I think they go down this week against Florida State.
All right. Thank you to Sammy from Hoosier Huddle for joining us today. Thank you for my dear friends, Delphi Bracketology graduates, Jesse Scowden and Daniel Jakes. I can't thank you guys enough for continuing to want to talk with me about sports and get me started on this podcast. I appreciate everyone. If you have any ideas, follow us, Sports Talk with Tonsoni on Twitter at Tonsoni1. Let me know what you'd like to talk about. I'll try to bring you some information. Listen to us on iTunes or Google Play as well. We love talking sports, and we'll be coming to you on a regular basis. So for all of our guests, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.